brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you more ways to play your game your way. Coming up in the broadcast over the next 2 hours, Matthew Shinetti will be by. Who else do we have? Rex Hoggard from the Golf Channel talking about a story you did in the Star yesterday about future of the PGA Tour and, of course, the playoffs this weekend. Steve Phillips will be by. And Cameron Gauntz. And we're going to launch into something. Matthew Shinetti messed up the guest order today. So when I got in here, Doogie and actually Simon Alex and I put together what we think is a scintillating top. It'll start like this.
Yes guy, no guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, drivers and passengers, viewers and listeners, time now for Yes Guy, No Guy on OverDrive, the radio show. Yes Guy, No Guy, and there's only one tonight. One question. Yes Guy, No Guy. It was valid for Jays fans to boo their team last night.
Yeah. Speaking of accidents, speaking of hit and runs.
Or not.
Yeah. Jays got hit and didn't run. The Jays pitchers got hit a lot. And yes, guy is the short answer. It's valid because, as John Schneider said after the game, these are great fans. These, what everybody sells is these are the best fans in the sport. And Blue Jays, the Blue Jays manager said that about the Toronto fans. And it's hard to argue the Blue Jays fans aren't among the best in the sport because they're still filling the place, despite the fact their team has underperformed all season. And, as Schneider said, when you're getting your butt kicked, he used a slightly stronger word, you have to expect that the locals are going to show their displeasure. And I think people were very reasonable in the displeasure they showed. They booed when they went down 10-0. They booed when they
6-run sixth.
Botched, the 6-run sixth. And they booed when they botched a pop-up when they were down 11-2. And they booed Vladdy when he, grounded out again on a night when he went 0 for 3.
I agree. Let's listen to John first. Here's John Schneider after the game and how he summed it up.
You understand it, right? Because, for one, the fans are coming out every single night, which we love and we appreciate. And there's no better fans in the sport. That's evident. You know what I mean? That with the support that we have from coast to coast. So they're entitled to their opinion. You know what I mean? When you're getting your ass kicked pretty good, they're allowed to have their opinion. But we love their support every night.
So I'm going to go yes guy in that, too. They were more than justified in the booing, and you pay your prices, and they're not cheap. You get to say whatever you want, provided it's with good taste.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's a long time coming, right? The pent-up frustration is considerable in this town, and it's understandable. I think there's really been a ton of people that have been willing to give the Blue Jays the benefit of the doubt for almost the entire season. Because of what they saw in the playoffs, right? When you have a playoffs like the Jays had, where you come within a whisker of winning a World Series, and when you're Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and you're the $500 million man who absolutely delivered when it mattered in the postseason last year, people give you a lot of rope, right? They're willing to accept, okay, slow start, okay, slow middle. And now it's a slow end and kind of a torturous end. And people are starting to say, okay, I've kind of forgotten the fact that we almost won the World Series, and now I'm realizing that this team just isn't very good. And now it's also, Jim, I think, a realization that not only are they not very good this year, there's the specter of them not being very good next year, because making this team good in one offseason, given the challenges that will face the management group here, is not going to be easy.
I agree with that. Last year, you have the expectation of what happened last year. What a ride that was. And so I think this is a pro sports problem. How do you maintain the expectation? Now, there's a few teams that pull that off. There's a few athletes that pull it off. But by and large, most of the time, the answer would be no guy. It doesn't continue on. And you have to deal with the wreckage at the side of the road to move forward. Next year, we go into maybe there isn't any baseball, or maybe there is. We don't know, right? So that could be, if it turns out that way, and you and I have memories of when that would happen on a regular basis, that is a fork in the road for everybody. So hopefully it doesn't get there. I just think that in this situation, and a lot of people have made note of Vladdy smiling after an out. I don't want to interpret somebody's facial expression. Maybe he was being sarcastic with himself for all I know. But there's a search for a villain here, isn't there?
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean,
Yep.
and you've got to point the finger somewhere, and here it is with Vladdy, another weak grounder to the right side, and you hear the boos and you see the smile, and I think, look, we talked about this yesterday on the show, Jim, of the idea that Vladdy was that took some heat from Nathan Lucas for the would-be Gatorade shower the night before, and the idea that Vladdy is up to hijinks at a moment where maybe some baseball purists would say it's not really that, even though they won the game the other night, not really the time for celebration because you're still
Right.
a long distance away from the third wild card. Right now, you're 3.5 games back. You're still in the middle of a dismal season. And to that, I would say, look, I understand the no fun police. Like, the Blue Jays have been accused of being a franchise, a management group that doesn't like dugout hijinks. We talked yesterday about the fact that Teoscar Hernandez may have been run out of town for all the popcorn showers and all the nonsense that went on down at the end of the dugout. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but I do think the idea that there was a certain vibe to the dugout that the management didn't like at times in recent years is true. And I do think there are people who would say, hey, man, like, pick your spots. Like, when you're in a morass like this team is in right now, maybe it's okay to be enthusiastic. It's okay to have a little bit of fun when you win, but maybe read the room a little bit would be the phrase, right? And Vladdy doesn't do that. I would say, okay, like, it's better than him sulking. It's better than him being an insufferable jerk. And so you got to put up with something. The bottom line is no one's happy with you when you're a $500 million player and you're playing like a guy who should be in the minors. And that's what Vladdy's doing.
Well, that's the bottom line on it. I don't want to get into analyzing post-game sentences and taking them out of context or facial expressions. The bottom line is, while we struggle with trying to figure out what's going on and the fan base is upset, maybe the players don't know what's going on either. I mean, for them, they enjoyed it as just as much, probably more than we did last year. I'm going to say absolutely more than we did, and now they're left with this, and it is problematic. We'll get back into that as we go along. Cisco's tonight. Seattle's in town. Next week they're on to Cleveland, which could be problematic. But we have another new game.
Oh, no guy.
Yeah, that's a list, the oh no guy list. And so here it is. On the oh no guy list, I need to know what your number one is. The Kawhi Leonard deal not going through. That's number one. Number two, Dylan Larkin not being traded. Number three, no general manager in Detroit to trade him. And number four, Vladdy Guerrero not hitting a home run at home. Those are four wacky things.
Yeah, four things that are hard to get your head around. The one that concerns me the most, if I'm really analyzing him, is Vladdy. I mean, to me, it's just impossible. It's essentially impossible to explain how a guy that was that potent when it mattered in the postseason last year could be this useless in the regular season less than a year later. And there's just no explanation for it. If the explanation turns out to be injury, Jim, and I know there's people that have hypothesized that it has to be injury. Like, if this guy's healthy, then how the hell is he swinging the bat so poorly? If injury is the answer, then there's some explaining to do about why they haven't sat him out longer, why he hasn't sought some treatment. Go over to the German fountain of youth, a la Austin Matthews, find a way to get better fast. But we really haven't seen him do that, to our knowledge.
No.
We took the concussion IL recently, but that certainly is a different kind of injury, and a concussion. The concussion happened, and you assume you passed the protocols to return to play and is ready to go. But if there's something that's impeding him physically, then I'm not sure the Jays have handled it properly, because why wouldn't you have sat him out for a stretch in, whenever he got hurt and sort of got him healthy? We know he complained of some back problems around the All-Star game and didn't attend because of that. But the bottom line is, like, of those four things, like, your best player, your $500 million centerpiece,
right,
not hitting a home run at a place where you're charging, very expensive prices to people to get through the door and very expensive prices for people to stay in there and feed and nourish themselves. There couldn't be anything that's worse for business than Vladdy face-planting like Vladdy is face-planting.
So, understanding that the player knows more than anybody how frustrating that is, in a game where you're getting wiped out on home turf and you ground out the first base, you might have a sarcastic smile on your face, like, "Oh, this is going to keep happening."
Here we go again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Vladdy's demeanor. I'm worried about his production.
Yep.
You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, he can
Or
be
lack of
whoever
it.
he wants to be. Like,
Yep.
if he's slugging and if he's an OPS machine, nobody cares how he acts. You know, like it doesn't matter if he's happy-go-lucky or miserable. Like, we've seen all kinds of great athletes act in all kinds of different ways. Kawhi Leonard's a guy who, you know, speaking of a guy that may soon be playing in Toronto, you know, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
and
may.
that's probably number 2 on my list of,
Yeah.
you know, no guy concerns. You know, you can never really read Kawhi's expressions or lack thereof
Yeah.
in the way he carried himself and the way he sort of went about his business. But you didn't care because when it was game time, he was an absolute dog and one of the fiercest competitors we've ever seen in this town. The most important player in franchise history by a mile.
Yep.
I know people are calling Kyle Lowry the GROAT, the greatest Raptor of all time, but he ain't the GROAT if Kawhi Leonard doesn't show up.
That's right.
And he's probably not the GROAT because I'm not sure how you say greatest when, like, Leonard's the most important. What is, you know, what's greater than most important? You know, like the linchpin of the only season that's really mattered in franchise history, the one where you won the thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm not fixated on the way people carry themselves. I'm fixated on the way a baseball player swings the bat.
Totally agree. Coming up for the Jays, Cease, Soriano, and Scherzer on the weekend. They sent down Simeon Woods, Richardson, who got torched last night. C.J. Van Eyck has been recalled for the weekend. Tons of CFL starting tonight, Montreal and Winnipeg. And Matthew Shinetti will join us on the phone next. This is OverDrive, watching on TSN 4 and 5, the TSN app, TSN 1050, the iHeartRadio app, and live on YouTube.
US Open begins Sunday on TSN. Subscribe now.
OverDrive continues. Jim Taddy, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. Mailed in Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. Enjoys $15 lunch at BP. When you get an entree, a side, and a drink, you'll get it all in 20 minutes or less. A fast lunch doesn't have to be fast food. See you for the $15 fast lunch at your local Boston Pizza. So, CFL action tonight, Montreal, Winnipeg. Tomorrow night, Hamilton and Calgary. That's at 3 in the afternoon. Then Toronto and Saskatchewan. And Sunday night, BC in Ottawa, where the Red Blacks are 0-10. In Montreal tonight, 9-1. Let's bring in Matthew Shinetti now, who will be hosting the panel, CFL and TSN, all weekend long. He's got a bunk somewhere in here. Matthew, how are you?
Well, currently stuck on the 401 eastbound, Jim Taddy. I can give you a traffic update if you want, but no, it's going to be exciting. You know, Laura Dyken's off, Kate Burness is off, so I guess that they want me to come in. So I'm pretty excited. It's going to be it's a significant weekend, especially when Montreal can clinch a playoff spot before before September if they win and the Ticats win tonight.
Now, there was a time you were noted for your shoes. Do you have a shoe cam on the panel? Is we're going to see that?
You know what? We will be doing something at the big board tonight, so you viewers will definitely be able to see what shoes I'm wearing. You know, I've always. You're a good man, Jim Taddy. I'm always very particular about what I wear and what it goes with my attire. So, you know, can't miss an opportunity, especially if I'm in Studio 6 with the boys tonight.
So, Shinetti, we got a big one tonight. Obviously, this incredible, potent Alouettes offense goes out to Winnipeg. Of course, Winnipeg, the sports town that is reeling from the trade demand of their illustrious three-time Vezina-winning goaltender, hoping for some good news on the football field. What do you make of this Bombers team? I mean, they're coming off that game against the Elks, where they're up big in the first half, and they're against the top team in the West, and yet they spit it up and lose on a walk-off field goal. They've been talking about their inconsistency, which says, hey, they can be among the best teams in this league, and yet they can also be something else. Where do you see them heading as we head into this big matchup?
You know, Feschuk, I think when you look at the narrative of great teams, irrespective of the sport, there always comes a point when the downward slide begins where there is a sense of who you are and who you thought you used to be. And I'm looking at the Bombers right now and tonight thinking it could be a significant moment if they haven't gone ahead and really made a statement tonight. And making a statement tonight against the 9-1 Alouettes team would be significant. But that offense, that Bombers offense, sits dead last in passes over 30 yards. And all week, Mike O'Shea, offensive coordinator Tommy Condell, Zach Collaros, Nick Dembski. Nick Dembski is sitting 13th. The best Bombers receiver right now on the list of league receivers is 13th. That's Nick Dembski. That is shocking. Certainly they have Ontario Wilson and Tim White, and they want to have the ability to push the ball downfield, and they can't. And now they're going up against an Alouettes team that will even they spotted the Red Blacks, the woeful Red Blacks, 7 points last week right off the start of the game, and then buried them. I mean, that's the one thing about just how high-powered not only Davis Alexander is, Tyler Snead, Tyson Philpott, Travis Tice now in the running game. If the Bombers can't figure out their offense, we might be looking at a point in this season, not only that they're sitting fourth and could get caught in, certainly they're the crossover conversation, but might get caught up in that situation where they might be dragged down to last in the West. And there are more questions about Zach Collaros and his effectiveness, even though he had that neck injury. But looking at his stat line, he only has 6 touchdowns and 4 picks. I mean, that's when you compare that to the astronomical numbers Davis Alexander is putting up, it's like you're wondering what kind of Bombers team we're seeing in front of us, and we'll get a chance to see them tonight because there's no bigger test than going up against the best team in the league.
Matthew, I mean, really the storyline in this league is the battle in the West, Saskatchewan, BC, Winnipeg, and Calgary. I mean, that's a 4-team race. That is heated, isn't it?
Yeah, and Calgary was, a month ago, we were talking about Vernon Adams Jr. being an MLP candidate, and that's how quickly things can flip in the West. And if you're Saskatchewan or you're Edmonton, you're looking at BC now because the BC Lions, back in 2011, They had a similar start to the season when they were woeful and not good at all. And then they clicked. And the one thing that makes this team click is Nathan Rourke. And coming back from his injury, to see the way he's playing, I mean, the game in Calgary not too long ago, I mean, he was throwing passes on a rope, and not just passes in the short and intermediate game. He was throwing, 40, 50-yard passes as if they were just flying off his hands with a flick of his wrist. And given the fact that they're facing the Ottawa Redblacks, I mean, you feel for the Redblacks. You have to. And I know a lot of guys on that team. I certainly know Sean Burke, who lost his job this week, who was the player personnel executive. I mean, this is not exactly the way that they wanted their season to go, but it is right picking for the BC Lions. And the West, as you say, Jim Taddy, is primarily where all the excitement is right now, even though certainly in the East we can talk about Chad Kelly and the way he's throwing the football, both his touchdowns and his interceptions, and the ongoing drama that's the Hamilton Tiger Cats and their quarterback situation. But if you're in the East right now, I mean, it's Montreal and it's everybody else, and you're waiting to see what team is the crossover team from the West. The West is just setting the pace right now.
Well, you talk about tipping point games, Matthew, and Toronto heading out to Saskatchewan tomorrow to face the Riders, and they're 5-5. And as you point out, like Chad Kelly is a high wire act, right? He can wow you going deep like almost nobody else in this league, and he can also just make you put your head in your hands, wondering what the heck he was thinking as he throws another of his many interceptions. Where are you with him? I mean, do you believe that there's? I mean, we know who he is. We know he's into his 30s now. But can he maybe refine that sort of balance as the season goes on here and become a little more dangerous and a little less volatile, or is that just a pipe dream?
He's going to have to be, Dave, because he's going to have to find a way of measuring the way he's looking at the field and the windows he's throwing in. I cast everyone's mind back to the second half. I think Kevin Mittal was 10, 12 yards away in the end zone, and Chad Kelly threw a heater, like literally threw it as hard as he could. And that is what he is doing in every aspect of the field. If he sees a window, he's throwing for it. I watched him in practice last week. Even in practice, he's throwing the football with intent all the time. And when you look at a coach like Mike Miller, who, when we go all the way back 24, 23, 22 and 25 with Chad Kelly, the one thing that the perspective was within the Argos and outside the Argos is that Mike Miller was the Chad Kelly whisperer. And I'm hearing a little bit of discontent about, Mike Miller being the first-year head coach and being able to find that level of consistency in the offense and not have it be, frankly, reckless. I mean, even though Chad Kelly, you say it rightly, Dave, when he is on, to watch him throw the football deep in this league, I mean, maybe Nathan Rourke does it as well, and we've certainly seen Davis Alexander do it, but Chad Kelly can really move the football at will when he wants to. But if he keeps throwing it into the opposition hands, especially going into a weekend like this, they can't be up and down. If you're going to challenge the Montreal Alouettes, you're going to have to find some level of consistency, and that's on Mike Miller and his coaching staff as a first-year head coach. And it is certainly on Chad Kelly to taper down and temper those situations that he's trying to fit the ball in, because at some point, and we've seen this with Chad Kelly in the playoffs, I don't mean to cast everyone's mind back to his 4-interception performance in the 2023 East Final, but that is what happened. I mean, he literally, some of the throws, you were at your head in your hands, and you're like, what is he thinking? So, this is the situation we find ourselves in.
That might have been one of the weirder games I've ever seen in terms of what you expected to have happen and how it played out.
100%.
So we were talking, you mentioned consistency. So if you're running the Ticats, if you are the head coach of the Ticats, and you've got sort of rotating quarterbacks because each of them shows something, but it just doesn't seem to take off, how do you handle that situation?
You know what, Jim? It's one of those things where you There certainly is a difficulty when you're trying to manage a quarterback, and you see how well the quarterbacks are throwing, and you got to go ahead and kind of protect them from themselves sometimes. Yep. And protecting them from themselves sometimes really is about, especially in Mike Miller's situation with Chad Kelly, making sure that he kind of understands and there's an agreement of anticipation, because you can't fit it in all the time. And I think right now, just the way that Kelly is playing and what he's trying to do, that he's trying to fit it in every scenario, and you can't do that.
Shanetti, I wanted to diverge for a minute. We had so many great chats about your other love, the other football, what we call soccer during the World Cup, and we haven't spoken since that evil Johnny Infantino tried to sell the World Cup to those nasty private equity folks and had his efforts repelled by the greater good of the greater majority of federations in FIFA. What did you make of that? And is soccer going to be okay, Shanetti? Like, tell us.
Well, this is what I will say about Gianni Infantino. He certainly has spent a lot of time around a group of individuals who believe that it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong or in between. You yell as loud as you can and make the most persuasive argument in your mind, and you're going to do it on your own. And there was the president of UEFA, Alexander Seferin, is the next power player after Gianni Infantino who can dictate where world football goes. And the fact of the matter is this. If Alexander Seferin, who's been making the media rounds this week, has been saying, we're putting a candidate together to make sure that Gianni Infantino knows that he no longer has the confidence not only of the European Confederation, but the confederations around the world. Certainly Victor Montagliani and CONCACAF have said their piece, and the Asian Confederation have said their piece. And then also, too, now we're hearing all the rumblings that Mexico may or may not be in the North American region and might try to go down to the South American region. It is certainly political intrigue, but here's the rub. Gianni Infantino is not all powerful, and he's certainly learned that in world soccer. And if he hasn't learned it, when the Congress comes together near the end of this year and they're looking to pick candidates, believe me, there will be candidates ready to take his job. Maybe, certainly Victor Montagliani from East Vancouver, his name has been tossed out. But Alexander Seferin is the ultimate power broker because Europe, irrespective of world football, is still the ultimate power center in world football.
I mean, that's an no guy moment. That whole proposal, right? I mean,
yes.
Let's do this. No guy. You're not allowed at the table. I mean, why would he even do that? It's almost delusional, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, money talks. I mean, everything we talk about, certainly all the reporting about private equity firms, taking the LA Dodgers and the LA Lakers and now the Yankees. And could you imagine private equity in world football? I mean, not to saying that there is some holier than thou biblical statement to be made about World Cups being every 4 years, but as we see the intensity and the high performance demands on soccer players consistently, the fact is the idea of having a men's World Cup every 2 years, the fact of having a club World Cup like we saw last summer, and we can have an hour-long conversation about how ridiculous that was, having that every 2 years. This is literally a power play between FIFA, who sees that the European Confederation, UEFA, constantly is making money with the Champions League, the Women's Champions League, the UEFA Conference League, the UEFA Europa League, not to mention the Euros that they do every 4 years. And they're flush with cash and they're flush with resources. And FIFA, I mean, that's what money does. It creates competition. And Gianni Infantino wanted to be the guy, being the president of FIFA, not understanding that it's a non-profit organization that makes him a steward of the game. He's more obsessed with the money aspect of it. And truth be told, certainly, we know that money is rife everywhere, as I said off the top. But the fact is, this is a sport internationally that when you try to touch that third rail about altering the aspect of the game, selling it off to private equity, you've certainly seen this revulsion around the world. But there is another side to this, and I wonder politically if Infantino doesn't try to play certain confederations in certain parts of the globe off each other, because the one thing is true. There are haves and have-nots, not only in club soccer but international soccer. And in international soccer, the have-nots tend to be in the global south. Sometimes you can look at, particularly at South America, you can look at Africa. They have been conspicuously either on the fence or quiet because they want to see whomever is going to come in, if UEFA is going to offer up their own candidate or anybody else wants to come in, even if it's Victor Montagliani, that they want to see what resources are offered to them. Because the one thing Gianni Infantino has said, I'll keep the cash flowing. And even though we've seen UEFA and CONCACAF and the Asian Confederation come out and kind of wag their finger, others have been silent. Again, even though the game, there is this sanctimonious way that we look, especially, I've been lucky enough to be at World Cups to see the world and how it embraces the game. We live in a world where it's not always about the love for the game, but it's about the profit margin.
All right, back to the march to the Grey Cup, Shanetti, and And speaking of money, there's been nobody who's been more bankable than Davis Alexander this season. I mean, we're talking about Alouettes, Bombers tonight. You'll be on the panel on TSN. Is there any chance anybody catches Davis Alexander in the MOP race?
The only thing that Davis Alexander has to worry about is himself. Last week, he had a very interesting quote after they beat the Ottawa Redblacks, talking about how he'll give his body for any first down, for any yard. And certainly we saw last year that the only thing that kind of maybe diminished that Grey Cup, and the Rough Riders were worthy winners and all that, absolutely. But Davis Alexander's hamstring was the primary talking point, the primary storyline going into that game. Listen, you can put him in the same conversation as Jalen Hurts in terms of a quarterback that goes into the workout room and is pounding the weights and pounding the weights and pounding the weights. But as you know, I wonder if Jason Moss at some point is going to have to save him from himself. Jason Moss loves coaching Davis Alexander. Anthony Calvillo loves coaching Davis Alexander because he's embraced not only being a quarterback, but being a quarterback in this league and being a face of the league and being a face of Montreal sports. The only thing that can hold him back is himself. And, as he's managing his body, again, he has dealt with injuries. Now we're moving into, is he going to play a full season? If he does, how is he going to manage that? Because this is someone, as I said, he's in the gym, he's dedicated. His late father was an international rugby player. He knows nothing else but competition and contact and wanting to beat the other guy. And with someone like that, kind of reminds you a little bit of Matt Dunnigan, doesn't it? I mean, the way that he treated his body is just as an implement of winning at all costs. The only person who can stop Davis Alexander from doing that is himself. And I hope that Jason Moss and Danny Machocha and that entire Alouettes organization really try to help that kid understand, hey, you know what? Do you need to be back squatting 700-800 pounds? I don't think you need to be doing that. We've got a running back who could do that for you. Do you need to be bench pressing all that much? We've got an offensive line that can do that for you. So he is a face of the league now. And, I was talking today, what would it mean to see a possible Nathan Rourke versus Davis Alexander Grey Cup? As we look towards the future of the league, we know with those two stars, it's in good hands, but you always, when I'm watching Davis Alexander, I kind of I'm gripping it tight on the wheel a little bit because I've seen him go down with injuries, and it diminishes the promising future of the game when a guy like that is not on the field.
Are you still in traffic?
No, actually, I was unfortunately for my Uber driver, as he pulled into the station here, he got into a car accident. So that was trying to do a radio hit while he was getting into a car accident was a wonderful little time on my Friday. So, but now, yeah, we're here, boys, and we're good.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Enjoy your weekend.
Take care, guys.
All right. When we come back, I'm going to talk some golf. So maybe just to preface before we get into Rex Hargard stopping by, in terms of the story you did in the Star yesterday.
Yeah, it's really a big moment for the PGA Tour, Jim. I mean, not only because Live Golf, the Saudi-funded juggernaut that threatened them all those years for the past few years and stole some of their higher-profile players at very big money, that's dead. There's also this idea that they're going to rejig the entire structure of the PGA Tour. They've got a former NFL executive, Brian Roloff, running the place, and we're going to find out how that's going to kind of not only reshape golf, but how it will affect the RBC Canadian Open.
Well, we'll explore that next. Rex Hargard stops by from the Golf Channel, and on the way out, you're watching OverDrive, listening to it on TSN 1050, TSN 4 and 5, also in the TSN app, streaming online, and live on YouTube.
Back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
OverDrive in the middle of Friday. Jim Taddy and Dave Peschuk from the Toronto Star subbing for the regulars. Going to bring in Rex Hoggard from the Golf Channel very shortly, but let me just go through the leaderboard. Gerard and Goddard up are at 9 under, and then there's Young, Scheffler, Badia, and Hovland all at 8 under. Rex, welcome in. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good, thanks. My buddy here, Dave Peschuk, wrote a piece in the Toronto Star about the PGA Tour and what happens next. I'm going to defer to him because he's got the background.
Yeah, Rex, the piece I wrote just talking about how we're in the 20th running of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and I found it interesting that even though it's been that long, you still had Rory McIlroy roll into his press conference and make that statement of, hey, I've always argued, does golf need playoffs? Which is something I think a lot of golf fans can probably concur with. And yet that's not going to stop the PGA Tour from having them. But it is, probably a little bit of what's behind the rejigging of the playoffs that will begin in 2028. How have you read that rejigging of the Tour Championship, and how do you think it is going to play a couple of years down the road?
And I think Rory's been pretty consistent on this throughout his entire career, and he's won this 3 times. So if anyone has a reason to feel some sort of way, as we say in the South here in the United States, it would be Rory, because he has made a lot of money. He's made a lot of success. He's won 3 times. He's really enjoyed East Lake and this playoff format. However, I'll actually defer to something Brian Rolapp, the CEO of the PGA Tour, said this week when he was talking about the playoffs. And he said, point blank, they're confusing. Who understands them? Certainly he said he did not understand them. There's a reason why next year will be the last FedEx Cup playoff. It'll be the last time we go through the process as it is right now. And what's going to be on the other side, what starts in 2028, is entirely new. It's going to be a big swing for the PGA Tour. It's a 2-week, essentially, Tour Championship. It's going to be match play. It's going to rotate to iconic courses, and we can kind of go through the list of courses that they seem to think they want to go to. But it's going to be completely different. And I think the hang-up is what Rory sort of verbalized, and I've heard this from a lot of players over the years. And playoff never really fit into professional golf. It works in every other sport. It works in football and hockey and basketball, every other sport, team sports. It works for, but it doesn't, because I think on the PGA Tour, in professional golf, you have the 4 majors. They stand above everything else. Just below that, I would say, is the Players' Championship, and trying to create something else after essentially what was the end of golf season has always been difficult for the PGA Tour. And I've always been one that says the Tour has done a good job. Here in the United States, this is football season, and everyone's attention is on football, whether that's the NFL or college football. But they've created something during a time of year that most people wouldn't be paying attention to golf, and some people are. So I think on some level, it's been a success, but certainly what Rory and Rolapp said is an indication of why they're moving on.
So, Rex, the other big change that's coming in 2028 is the so-called 2-track system. And I know Canada's not on the top of your mind, but if you've been hearing things around the tour as you make your way around the power brokers and the corridors of power, I mean, are you getting any sort of sense of how this 2-track system could affect a tournament like the RBC Canadian Open?
Not true at all. Canada has been at the top of my mind really since the beginning of this conversation, along with the Scottish Open, because these 2 events are very unique in what the PGA Tour's trying to do. I think the Canadian Open is a perfect example. When I was at the Canadian Open this year, I had a chance to talk with a lot of players about this, and there's no really good option for either the Canadian Open or the Scottish Open, because if it becomes either one of those events, become Tier 1 events, they're not Opens anymore. And that means that half the players in the field, which right now are up-and-coming Canadian players, they wouldn't have access to it. Now, the opposite of that, if it's a Tier 2 event, that means all of the top Canadians, and it's Corey Connors and Nick Taylor, and we can go on down the list, they wouldn't be allowed to go down and play Tier 2 events. So neither one of those options were going to be good for the Canadian Open. I think, talking with people, sort of trying to read between the lines a little bit, the PGA Tour wants to create sort of this fall International Open series where maybe you get a handful of the top players, but certainly going to these national opens. And I think the Canadian Open is a really good option here. Now, it's a little bit late in the season, but it would be right about now, late August, early September. I think you would end up getting the Canadian players, those top Canadian players coming back home to play, and it remains an open. I think all of those things are the only reason that's the best case scenario in my mind.
Yeah, it seems like there's a file on wherever you want to put the Canadian Open because it's been done in the past. When you look ahead, now that Liv is gone, the stuff you're talking about for next year, does it sort of stay like that going forward, or will there be tweaks along the way?
Oh, I always think there'll be tweaks along the way. We are talking about this is the 20th year of the PGA Tour playoffs, and I don't think there's been 1 year turnover to the next that they haven't done something, whether if that's the points or how many events we're talking about or how they hand out the Tour Championship or starting strokes. We can go through all the things they've done. I don't think this will be the finished product, and I think that's the beauty of the PGA Tour. They're not afraid to tinker. I think Brian Rolapp, coming from the NFL, he understands that you want to keep tinkering until you get it as close to right as you possibly can. Live Golf is going to be interesting. You said that it's over. I don't know if that's the case. 1.0 is definitely over. I was at the Indianapolis event 2 weeks ago. That's the end of that era. I think what they tried to build, Golf But Louder, is coming to an end because they don't have that never ending bucket of money that they had before. But I am curious to see what 2.0, if they can get it off the ground, looks like.
And what do you think might happen to the so-called live golf refugees if indeed, it becomes something less than what they signed up for? I mean, what do you think the appetite is to welcome guys like John Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau back to the PGA Tour, and vice versa? Like, is DeChambeau even interested in coming back?
I mean, that's the billion-dollar question, I guess, based on what we've gone through the last 5 years. I think John Rahm is probably the first one we'll learn this about because it seems pretty obvious that he wants to come back to the PGA Tour at the very least, leave Live Golf. And I think there is a pathway back. I mean, it's been pretty clear. Patrick Reed did it this year. He left Live Golf at the end of last year. He started playing the European Tour. He won early on the European Tour. He's #1 on their points list right now. He's guaranteed to have a PGA Tour card next year. He's going to be playing PGA Tour events in the next couple of weeks because he essentially served his 1-year suspension. That's the pathway back right now. Now, Brian Rolapp and the PGA Tour can reboot essentially the returning member program, which is a program they started earlier this year that allowed Brooks Koepka to come back without that 1-year penalty. I don't know that John Rahm, certainly Bryson DeChambeau, have any interest in sort of doing what Brooks had to do over the course of this season because there were some caveats. There was some small print that forced him to probably do some things that I don't think Bryson would do. And I think Bryson is a little bit different conversation. I think he is still on board with whatever Live Golf is going to become, at least until it goes down completely in flames.
So let's talk about the Tour Championship as round 2 is still in progress. Cameron Young lit it up, 8 under today, 62, a stroke off the lead. Tell us about his round, 62. Wow.
I mean, that is such a difficult golf course. I cannot overstate this. And I've looked at the rounds really the last 2 days, and a guy gets on a roll. And the greens are really good, but I think that golf course is one of the most difficult they play on the PGA Tour. And you say that, and it's because you get the Bermuda rough here in the South. It doesn't take a whole lot to make that really tough. And Cameron Young is an interesting scenario here because I've never, over 20-plus years, been in a scenario where I've been at East Lake. This is the first time I haven't covered the Tour Championship and had this deep of a conversation when it came to Player of the Year. Because if Cameron Young was to win this week at East Lake and win the FedEx Cup, you can make a really good argument that he should be Player of the Year. Certainly if Scotty Scheffler wins this week, he should absolutely be Player of the Year. But it's really fun to watch this coming down the stretch, and they're all going to make it interesting because, as you pointed out, you did the leaderboard. Scotty's right there, Cameron Young's just there, and then you also had a couple of players who were trying to get into the President's Cup as picks. So there's a lot of excitement going into Sunday.
So, when you listen to the pre-tournament comments from Scotty Scheffler, Rex, you could have got the idea that he was a little bit handicapped here with the case of hand, foot, and mouth disease that he believes he picked up from his kid coming back from daycare. You talked about sores on his throat and sores on his hands, and yet you look at the leaderboard, doesn't look like it's affecting him too much because he, just like Cameron Young and Colin Morikawa and Chris Gotterup and Victor Hovland, is just one stroke back of the leader, Ryan Gerard. I mean, would you bet against Scotty to close the deal this weekend and maybe close the deal on Player of the Year?
I'm never betting against Scotty Scheffler. I got out of that business a long time ago. I learned my lesson when it came to Scotty Scheffler. He's way too talented for that. And hearing him talk about the hand, foot, and mouth disease, I just kind of came away with the idea that yuck. It was kind of gross. I never had that. It doesn't sound like it's very pleasant to have blisters on your hand. I would assume it's very hard to play golf. We know he's such a creature of habit, and obviously what he went through last week at the BMW Championship that kept him from doing the things he wanted to. I looked it up. I spent a lot of, I went down a rabbit hole. I wasn't proud of this. Spent a lot of time learning about hand, foot, and mouth. After I learned about that, it's going to impact him for about 7 to 10 days. And according to him, he kind of came down with it last Monday. So I think he's pretty much cleared that hurdle. But when it comes to this golf course, when it comes to what he wants to do this season, what he was able to do 2 weeks ago in Memphis at the first playoff event, not just did he win, but he did it in just dominant fashion, winning by 8 shots. I think that's where Scotty's head is at right now.
So we don't have a Canadian at the Tour Championship, as you know, Rex, but we do have some Canadians who've had pretty darn good seasons. I mean, Sudarshan Yalamaraju, obviously a guy who's, gotten a lot of press in Canada. Interesting story, never really had a coach and did a lot of his learning through YouTube by himself with his dad, helping him out a little bit. What have you made of the impact that Sudarshan has made on the tour this year?
I think it's been massive. This goes back to the Players' Championship. Of course, that's where he kind of surfaced on a lot of our radar, where he's such a unique individual, as you pointed out. We're so used to having, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but we're so used to having robots on the PGA Tour, guys who were born and essentially bred to go out and to do from a very, very young age. And it seemed like Sudarshan found another way of doing it. I think Ryan Fox is right there in that category, and it's so refreshing to see these types of players. And I will say, Jeff Ogilvy, who of course is the captain of this year's President's Cup, International President's Cup team, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks in Chicago, I would actually be surprised if he's not giving Sudarshan a really hard look to be a member of that team, because I think he could really contribute and maybe turn things around for the international side.
Rex, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Rex Hoggard from the Golf Channel. The Tour Championship. Gerard has the lead at 9 under and a bunch of guys at 8 under, including Scotty Scheffler and Cameron Young with the 8 under 62. Where do you go after that?
Yeah, exactly. No, hey man, that's an impressive round out there. You got to hand it to him. But yeah, this is a great leaderboard. I mean, as much as
changed while we were doing that conversation.
Yeah, and as much as, look, I've never been a big fan of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and sometimes you'll think, like, what does this tournament even mean? Other than the fact there's a lot of money on the line. Like, the winner gets $10 million, Jim. The last place guy gets $355,000 US for finishing DFL. Sometimes you wonder, like, what's it all about? And so it's nice to see that they're actually realizing that. Like, that 20 years into it, they're saying, you know what, we need to change course here. We need to reimagine this thing. And so I'm sort of looking forward to the idea they're going to go to match play in a couple of years, and we'll have a completely different sort of season capping event that has a chance to maybe carve out a niche that this one never has.
Yeah, I mean, it was always, I don't want to say controversial, but debated.
Yeah.
Is this the way you want to end the season? And not it was never unanimous, so it had to change, right?
Yeah, it was kind of strange. They thought it was going to be the Super Bowl. They billed it as the Super Bowl when they started it 20 years ago. It's kind of like a mid-major college bowl. It almost feels like, you got great players there, but it doesn't really have the import of, a big moment, because you can't usurp the majors, and you can't do better than the Players' Championship. You can't do better than the Ryder Cup. So you got to find another way to differentiate yourself. And I think the match play format, I know the players don't love it. They haven't played match play on the PGA Tour for a reason since 2023. And I think part of that reason is the players don't love match play. I think the fans like it. And I think it has a chance to be a good TV product if they do it right.
Yeah, I mean, because of the 4 majors, I mean, they're so unique. Anything that tries to sort of compete with that, to me, that's good enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, yeah. It's a good idea to do something different. And, whether or not it works, we'll find out. But I like that they're trying. And, if you could say anything for Live Golf, I barely watched, 10 or 12 shots of Live Golf.
I'm with you.
During the entire existence
I
of the
couldn't figure
thing.
out what I was watching.
And I love golf. Yeah. At least I will give them credit for one thing. They shook things up. They made the PGA Tour re-examine itself, and maybe the final product of the Live Golf era will be a better PGA Tour. If you're a lover of the game and you're a little bit optimistic about the vision being charted by Brian Roloff.
Coming up with the next hour, it'll be Steve Phillips, our Major League Baseball insider. Then Cameron Gaunt's talking some hockey as Overdrive continues. TSN 4 and 5, TSN 1050, the TSN app, and live on YouTube.
this is amazing. What a dream this has been.
The Emmys, live Monday, September 14th on CTV and Crave.
It's Mail It In Friday.
The plant called and said if you don't come in tomorrow, don't bother coming in Monday.
Woohoo! 4-day weekend.
This is OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
Oh, yes, guy. Mail It In Friday. Jim Taddy, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you more ways to play your game your way. So, Steve Phillips will be by in mere minutes. As we look at the Jays getting set for Seattle, Cease, Soriano, and Scherzer is the menu for the Jays starters in this series. Day off, then on to Cleveland for a series, which could be really devastating because Cleveland's really red hot, but, you know, that doesn't last forever either. So that would be a real statement if the Jays could come out of there with something. But the bottom line is, I guess we're trying to figure out how much damage comes out of that lopsided loss at home to KC last night as they lose that series and lost the one in New York. And now's not the time to slide. As you cast your net of analysis, I mean, clearly Vladdy is front and center, but are there any others? What are the other suspects on your list?
Well, it's the offense as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is here's the billing tonight for the Apple TV game, Blue Jays Mariners. Come watch the two lowest scoring teams in Major League Baseball. These are the two worst offenses.
Oh, it's still scoreless, bottom of the 10.
Yeah, and maybe the two biggest disappointments, Mr. 60 home runs himself, Cal Raleigh, who's, you know, been on a bit of a hot streak, actually. You know, has, 5 home runs in his past handful, I guess 5 home runs in his past 7 or 9 games. But he's only got 18 home runs. And, of course, Vladdy, who would love to have 18 home runs right now, but only has 7. And
none here.
And these are the two teams that, you know, two playoff teams last year who aren't going there this year if you go by the Fangraphs playoff probabilities. And to your point, like, this is a moment where you got to get hot if you want to make your run. And the Cleveland Guardians are realizing that. They've won 7 in a row. They're suddenly 2 games over 500, and they've got sole possession of that third wild card because of it. The Blue Jays and Mariners just haven't been able to get any traction, and therefore they're in the rearview mirror of the Guardians right now, and I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon.
So a week ago when we sat here, you and I, we were talking, and Steve Phillips was on, we were talking about that schedule, the sub-500 teams. Well, the Jays are one of them, so, you know, clearly it doesn't really mean anything. They didn't look very good against KC.
I was going to say, like, quality of competition's got nothing to do with the Jays' problems. It's the quality of the Jays that's the problem, or lack thereof. And the fact that, you know, when you're, like, they've had so many different bugaboos in these handful of series here recently. Not only can they not score, you know, last night they couldn't pitch. There's been nights where they couldn't field it. You know, big throwing errors. There's been nights where they've made mental errors on the base paths that have lost them games. It's been a mix of everything, right? Like, the fact that you don't score runs obviously is the biggest problem. The fact that they're the second lowest scoring team in Major League Baseball, only ahead of tonight's opponent, is ultimately the problem. But the solution, Jim, I don't know. Is it booing?
Well, you're allowed to express yourself.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly, I just go back to this problem with the lack of scoring runs. If you throw out the magnificent run of last year, I mean, this was a consistent problem over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, we were talking about it before last year's incredible playoff run to the World Series. We were talking about how this was a team that was playing, you know, Central Division small ball in the American League East, and it's just not a good recipe, right? And here we are again. They got the world's most expensive singles hitter at the heart of their order in Vladdy Guerrero Jr. They don't slug, they don't hit home runs, you know, they don't run the bases particularly well to make up for that. You know, I'm not sure how you're going to win games doing that, and something's got to change fast, and they're running out of days to change it.
From our Remember Me file, Anthony Santander is working on a pitching machine and trying to get to live hitting, and the goal is to get him back in the Jays roster by the end of the year, which would be a moral victory for him.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, does he still play for the Jays? Like, he hasn't played this entire season. We saw him sparingly in the playoffs and didn't make much of an impact. He was clearly injured. We saw him trying to field baseballs in the playoffs. It was absolutely, an adventure that you don't want to be having in the outfield. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you talk about athletes who Toronto fans have zero to very little expectations of. I think Tony Taters is at the top of that list. I think people have sort of given up hope that they're going to get anything out of Anthony Santander. And if they do get something out of him, it'll be found money.
Yeah, so, that's something to look forward to, I guess, and maybe, sets up what could happen next year to sort of alleviate some of that concern about scoring runs. There's a live bat when he's able.
Well, that's then the problem. He hasn't been able. Yeah. And, as he gets older, it's hard to imagine that's going to change for the better. I mean, this is a guy, what is he? He's 30. Yeah, he's only 31 years old. So it's not like he's ancient, but he moves around like he is.
Well, so Seattle on the weekend and off to Cleveland, and clearly it didn't work out against KC, and a sting from the Yankee series as well. But are you ready to throw in the towel? Or there's plenty of time here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think because the American League has been so mid, to use that phrase, you never really felt like they were completely out of it because it didn't feel like anybody they were chasing was uncatchable. And yet now the Guardians have done what they've done. They've put a little space between themselves and the pack that's behind them. You got to respect that. Like that 7-game win streak is exactly what the Jays have needed, and yet they haven't had one.
Yeah.
So
the story turns in a hurry when you go on a roll.
Yeah, if you get on a roll, people start feeling better about things. You start carving out distance between you and your opponents, and suddenly, the fact that, hey, guess what? The Jays thought they had a bunch of sub 500 opponents from now to the end of the season. Suddenly, Cleveland's over 500. So
yeah,
and they're on a roll. So
yeah, so there's another narrative that dies.
Exactly.
They're not sub 500 anymore. Playing 507 ball and have won 7 straight, 8 and 2 of their last 10.
Yeah,
that's lights out. And
wow,
when you look at the company they're keeping. Let's bring in Steve Phillips now. Steve joins us in the Maple Toyota hotline. Steve, welcome in. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, good to be with you guys.
Our pleasure to have you. So we're sort of going over. We were with you last Friday, and we were talking about aiming on Boston, and now 2-4 the last 6. What's your take on the Jays' week?
Yeah, tough week, and obviously the Bieber injury and going on the injured list really makes it tough. They're already pushing this bullpen to the limit. And then, to be able to lose Bieber, who was given some length here recently, even inserting Arrighetti into the spot, you're still looking at a bullpen day. And so it's going to make it tough. I mean, and, if Vladdy doesn't get it going, it seems like a constant theme, ad nauseum, that we're talking about Vladdy and his lack of production. But, that really is a key right now. The pitching needs some margin for error from the offense, and it'll make them a better pitching staff, and it'll give them a better chance to win.
So of these two teams that'll play tonight here, Steve, Toronto and Seattle, met in the ALCS last year. We know what happened, a thrilling 7-game series, but which of them has let down their fan base more?
Yes. It's yes, that both of them have, right? Because I think that even, so as an analyst, I don't root for any one team. I just root to be right. And so, they both let me down this year because I had them both being playoff teams again and both meeting in the ALCS once again. And they both have been really disappointing. And there's stories to tell for each team. The young pitching has not really blossomed and gotten even better in Seattle like we thought they could. They've had flashes of that, but not consistently. And then they haven't hit. Cal Raleigh and Vladdy are 1-2 in the poster guys for the struggling season and the lack of production. And so at least he's got 18 home runs, Cal Raleigh. Now the batting average isn't great, but at least he's hit the ball in the ballpark some. So I think both these teams have been disappointing, and I would say probably most analysts thought that last year was going to be the platform for the Mariners to take it further. I still had the Jays, with a shot to get back to the World Series. And now it's going to take a miracle for both these teams to be able to even get to the playoffs.
So let's go back to Vladdy, as we always do. Can you recall a situation where you had to play somebody, their numbers were not very good, but you had to play him because whatever his injury was, if there was one, it wasn't going to get any worse?
Yeah, sure. And then, it's happened time and again. Here's the reality. Every team does it every season. Everybody's diminished right now. Everybody's got a nagging injury right now that's hampering them. Think about George Springer the last couple of years playing with, the aches and pains and limping around and still trying to get out there and perform and get it done. And sometimes it diminishes the player's performance in a way that he really can't live up to it. If it's a wrist or a back issue, that can sap the power out of a hitter. Sometimes with the leg issue, you can work around it a little bit and compensate some for it. And so, it's different for every player. But, I think that every team goes through it every season. And during the course of their career, every player goes through being dinged up in some way where you feel like it's impacting your performance, where it's pain, it's not an injury. And so you're still capable of playing, but, and you don't really talk about it. And so people just assume that there's nothing wrong with you. You're just not playing well. And then we only later find out, look at Anthony Volpe last year with the New York Yankees. He led the league in errors as a shortstop. Then we find out, well, he's got a torn labrum and he needs surgery on his throwing arm. Of course he led the league in errors, but we were just judging him to be a bad player for a period of time. And so, it's tough. Baseball is a grind. It's a tough game. And, many guys keep their mouth shut and just play with pain and don't explain how it's impacting their performance.
Steve, I wanted to get your take on this whole idea that John Schneider sort of came out the other day and said he didn't want to drop Vladdy in the batting order, even though there have been many, many calls for it from the fan base and analysts and pundits like yourself, because, and the logic he used was he didn't want to punish Vladdy. And to which a lot of people were saying, why is being dropped in the batting order a punishment? It's not about punishment. It's about production or lack thereof. How, if you're the GM of the team and you hear that, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I would talk to my manager, and it wouldn't have been this late in the season because I would have suggested, hey, have we considered moving him down on the lineup? And I'm assuming during that conversation, it would have come up, well, I don't want him to feel like it's a punishment. And my response would be, well, let's sit down and have a conversation with him and explain it to him that it's not a punishment, but we've got to try to win games. And our best way to do it right now is not with him batting second in the lineup or third in the lineup. It's him batting sixth in the lineup, where we can get some of the hot bats grouped together to try to put up a crooked number during the course of the game. And if he's uncomfortable with it, okay. His being comfortable hasn't led to great performance this year, so why not make him uncomfortable and see if that does something different? It may or may not work, and I know they've tried so many different things with him, but yeah, the one thing at some point is you have to stop worrying about feelings. What about our feelings? What about the fans' feelings? What about the front office feelings that we're paying you $50 million a year and you're not producing, and so we need to figure out a different way how to get you to produce again. And if you don't like it, then play better, right? That's just sort of the bottom line. And I actually think Vladdy would be fine understanding that.
I'm going to say John Schneider, so not to pick on him, but how would you rate how he's managed this year to last year? I would think it would be hard to rate a manager on that.
Yeah, so I think that considering what they've gone through this year and that they're in a race and that they're around 500, and he's gotten underperformance from stars, I think that he's done a pretty good job. He didn't have a choice on how to manage his bullpen. The only way, he had to steal wins wherever he could get them. And so the overuse of the bullpen is extraordinary. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, where one team has 4 of the top 15 appearances for relievers on one staff, where the next team closest has 2, and everybody else only has 1 of the top 5. it's extraordinary. But he kind of had to do it because his starting pitching wasn't as good as he thought. The injuries were there for it. He got taxed on trying to do it. They played so many close games because the offense wasn't there. So I understand what he did. And remember, after pitching another full month last year because of the playoffs, and then potentially the impact of the wear and tear this year on next season, they're going to have to really consider revamping the bullpen because good relievers this year who are overworked turn into underperforming relievers next season. And so, but I think John Snyder's done what he's had to do by piecing things together when they were all coming apart.
And those bullpen numbers, I mean, they've been consistently high all season long, right? Which really doesn't translate into a good finish, does it?
I mean, it shouldn't, and it can, but at some point you think it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And at some point, the appearance, I mean, Fluharty's appeared in over 70 games now with 28 to go. And it's extraordinary. And so, I think that fatigue can cause pitchers to struggle. Now you can manage around it a little bit and not go back-to-back days and still use guys a lot. But right now he can't afford not to use his best relievers, despite knowing that he probably can't afford to use them because they're going to wear down. And so he's doing what I would do. I would choose to use them. I'll run them into the ground, and then we'll figure out what to do if that ends up happening.
So two lowest scoring teams in baseball playing tonight, Steve. And, we talked about Vladdy ad nauseum. When you look at Cal Raleigh, he has heated up of late. He's got 5 home runs in his past 6 games. But there has been a lot made of the fact that he's only got 59 hits at this point in the season. Last year, of course, he had 60 home runs, which is amazing to think about. When you look at him and analyze his season, what explains the massive drop-off?
Yeah, boy, I think that if anybody could know it for sure, they'd make millions of dollars because they would have injected him with whatever it was going to take to fix it. What happens oftentimes when guys struggle like this is it becomes a mental thing. And then in their mind, they think, okay, now I've got to fix it. And they start to change things about their approach, their swing, how they're thinking, what they're trying to do to attack the opposition, what they think the opposition is doing to try to get them. They go up and say, okay, I'm going to be aggressive early in the count. Then swinging a breaking ball down in the dirt and it's 0-1. Then they're like, okay, I need to be patient. He takes a fastball down the middle. He's 0-2. And so it's one that I think physical parts, there were some, he got hurt for a bit, and I think that was part of it as well, but he never got in a rhythm. Element of doubt crept in. And I think that, to really understand baseball players, their minds are so fragile. And you can go from being the most confident guy in the world to the least confident guy in the world in a matter of a few months. And that's kind of what we saw with Cal Raleigh, and it's what we've seen with Vlad Guerrero Jr., that they can't believe what they've done in the past, and they can't really picture a pathway to get back to doing it right now.
Steve, little news out of the ballpark tonight that the Jays are going to try and get Anthony Santander back into the lineup by the end of the season. He's been attempting to sort of hit off a tee and get back to live baseball for the past few weeks here. Obviously, we know he hasn't played at all this season in the second year of the 5-year deal for $92 million. Clearly, we were just saying he might be the athlete in Toronto that fans have probably grown to expect the least of. Whatever they get out of Santander from here on out will feel like found money. But what's your level of optimism that, given how injury-riddled his time in Toronto has been, that he could actually provide value next year?
Yeah, he's the Giancarlo Stanton of the Blue Jays, right? And, in New York, everybody's worked up. Stanton can never stay on the field. I personally, if I were building the team, I would not consider him as any level of his production to be part of what I'm building for our success. I think that if what we can assume about what somebody's going to be is really what they've been over the last couple of years, then it would be silly to assume that he's going to step in the lineup, be a 40-homer guy, and drive in 100 runs. You can't even consider it. So I think they have to build their team without the thought of him being there. Then if he is, great. It's an addition to and a bonus to the team and the offense. If they can get him back to being a slugger in the middle lineup, so be it. But I think they have to consider who are our three outfielders and who's our DH. And then Santander is sort of the backup for all of those.
Jay's schedule. So after this weekend, 3 series on the road starting Tuesday in Cleveland. Cleveland is the breaking story. What's gone right for them?
Yeah, they're starting to hit. They've always had the really good pitching, but the offense is really starting to come around now. Jose Ramirez had that hamate bone injury we talked about with a wrist, if that, can sap some power. So he's not had a normal season, but he hit a ball off the bat at 106 miles per hour. I guess it was on Wednesday, and drilled his teammate on first base. He couldn't even get out of the way. The ball just ate him up and took a bite out of him. And so he's starting to come around. Then Chase DeLauder and Travis Bazana, 2 rookies, are sort of at the end of that rookie year where they're starting to feel like they get it a little bit. And they've picked up, a couple players, Nathaniel Lowe to plays first base, and Joe Waddell, some right-handed power in the outfield. And so there's, Stephen Vogt does a great job. He always believes in his team. And they take on his personality. Even if they struggle a bit, they still believe that it's in there and that they're going to come back. We've seen it over the last couple of years, even when they fell so far behind. And here they come once again, steamrolling and trying to get not only back into the wild card, but potentially to catch the White Sox.
Big feature matchup tonight, Steve. You're a Detroit guy. We all know that. And Detroit is hosting the L.A. Dodgers. And they're not just hosting the Dodgers. They've got Tariq Skubal on the mound for them after, of course, the trade deadline trade to L.A. As a Detroit guy, how do you expect Detroit to welcome their former ace?
Yeah, so it's funny that I heard that the stories in Detroit all week were the fans going to cheer or boo for Skubal, and I'm like, why would they boo him? Like, they traded him. I mean, you can't boo him. He wanted to stay. Like he said, I want to stay and finish it out and see what we can do here. They were 2.5 games out of the wild card, and they traded him away. And so he didn't do anything. I would hope they celebrate him. They put a video together and they play it every night. And every night that when he's pitching or not pitching, that they're celebrating him. He made baseball fun again in Detroit. I mean, my mom's still there. My mom likes baseball now because of Tariq Skubal. I mean, now she calls uniforms costumes, and so she doesn't quite get the game, but she loves the Tigers again, and called her cable company, said, listen, I don't have Tigers games. How do I get this now? And my brothers love him. So and Skubal really was a guy that gave it all for Detroit. He's even suggested, and I think it's a mistake, to start saying, I would consider coming back there. He needs. I mean, you're a free agent. Don't talk to anybody about getting discounts or going back or where you really want to go. Get everybody involved in it. But I think it's going to be a really fun night. I hope they cheer. I can't imagine people booing him. And if they do, I think they have to really consider, what is it that you want from a player other than he gave his heart and soul, and they decided that they were out of it with 2.5 games in the wild card race and moved him on.
And he wanted to stay, and he wants to come back. I mean, that's a perfect representative for your franchise, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, don't we all want players like that?
Yeah. Yes. Steve, thanks very much. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go talk to my mom and see if I can't get her to understand their uniforms now and not costumes. So
well, some of them are costumes, though. I got to say.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they are changing. That's true.
Thanks very much. Steve Phillips joined us in the Maple Toyota hotline. It's time to Toyota. Check out the Toyota Tacoma and Toyota Tundra pickup trucks, both available as hybrids. Maple Toyota near Canada's Wonderland in the Maple Auto Mall. What my favorite line of the show was, took a bite out of them.
Yeah.
That's like a major bruise.
That is good.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a must-win series, obviously, against Seattle. In fact, they all are, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, it feels that way. It feels like they got to go on a huge run here. And it would be the most unexpected run given how they've been playing, right? As Steve's pointed out, you got a tired bullpen. You got an offense that can't hit a lick. You've got a defense that's looked pretty sloppy at times. You got base runners that don't seem to know the fundamentals of the game. And you're not winning enough to really get back in the race. So suddenly you just got to flip a switch here. and change all that in one fell swoop, and you really don't have a lot of time to make it happen.
I mean, really, there was like a bad omen from the start. If you have your starting pitchers be injured like they were, sort of unravels everything and creates those numbers.
Yeah, the trickle down gets you eventually.
And then eventually it goes south, which is where it's headed right now. But we'll see. Coming up next, Cameron Gauntz will stop by. I'm going to talk some hockey as Gauncy makes his OverDrive debut, continuing on TSN 4 and 5, TSN 1050, the iHeartRadio app, and live on YouTube. OverDrive, mailed in Friday. Jim Taddy, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. Dave, remind me to read the Boston Pizza ad at the end of this segment. I want to get in the way of breaking news. Cal McCarr re-signs with Colorado, 163.2, 163.2, 8 years, average of 20.4 million. He goes right to the top of the cap, the most you can get under this deal.
It's pretty close. It's 17.9% of the cap.
Oh, it's not 20.
Yeah, well, okay. It's 20. It's 20.4 million, but you have to go off next year, right? Because next year's cap. So,
but it's next year.
Yeah, but I mean, the bottom line is it's the highest percentage of the cap of any existing player, and it's the biggest deal we've seen. So,
absolutely.
the first player in the history of the league to make 20 schmil.
And it's 8 years because as of September 15th, you can't do that anymore. It'll be down to 7. Let's bring in what a debut! What an opportunity for a debut. Cameron Gauntz is here. Mr. Gauntz, how are you today?
Great. Cale Makar news. Who better to have on than me?
That's right. There we go. A 20.4. I mean, somebody had to do it, right?
That's awesome. Again, if anyone's going to do it, like you said, it should be him. He's a defining defenseman for a generation, how he plays the game. I love that he did that. I'm sick of all this players, coaches, management, fans talking about they should take less. No, every other sport celebrates it. Hockey should celebrate it too. Finally, someone's making the type of money that some of these guys should make.
Well, that's fair, but I mean, Cameron, I'm wondering, we can celebrate it. We celebrate Cale Makar. There's no doubt he's an elite defenseman. He's incredibly fun to watch. But he's on a team with a guy, Nathan MacKinnon, who, in his last deal, took a fairly modest sort of approach and took a little bit of a bump over the highest paid player in the league and went that direction. I mean, and we do know that it's a hard cap. I mean, there's the NBA's got cap exceptions where you can sign your own players and it doesn't count, although the NBA cap is too confusing unless you got a PhD in finance. But I do wonder, how will this affect Colorado's pursuit of another cup?
It'll affect them for sure, but that's what you have a general manager for. A player shouldn't have to do a general manager's job. A GM's job is to put a team together under the stipulations that are in the CBA, and they gave a player a contract, so they now can't cry poor if you gave them the contract. I was a member of the executive committee for the PHPA. I was part of the NHLPA for years. I'm all about player empowerment, so I want players to earn as much as they possibly can. What you need to think about as well, though, unfortunately, is this could mean less money for other players on the team. But listen, I was a player who not one person ever bought a ticket to come watch Cameron Gauntz play. Everyone buys tickets to watch guys like Cale Makar, Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon. So those players deserve the money that's there for them because they're what drives the league.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the dollar figure. I've always said I've never met the person with too much money, and he's not the guy either. So, but the thing I'm a little concerned about is when we talk about Hellebuck and Larkin, these are guys that signed $8.5 million contracts at 3 years into an 8-year deal. Mo Seider might have a reason to be upset, but they signed in certain economics, and the economics have changed. So this is like moving into a street. When you're the last guy or the most recent person to move into a street, you're paying more for that house than anybody else on that survey did. And that's sort of something we've all lived with over a period of time. But I wonder in a dressing room, is that a factor at all?
I think if he wasn't the best player, it would be. Like if you were a player who definitely took the organization for everything they're worth and you don't deserve it, that might cause a couple guys to act with a bird in their saddle. But when you're Cale Makar doing it, I don't think so. Again, some guys are going to, no matter what happens, there's going to be some guys in the dressing room who are always going to be upset. They're going to have that chip on their shoulder because that's what drives them. But when it's Cale Makar doing it, I don't think so. I think that'll be taken well in the room. Of course, there's going to be some comments made here and there. I don't think he's going to let anyone pay for a dinner all year long, I can tell you that. But aside from that, I don't think it's going to be, because I think what this does is going to drive up everyone else's contracts. It's going to show that this is available for you out there. You just need to go and get it.
So, Cameron, we were talking about the player empowerment era here, and yesterday's big news had nothing to do with a contract being signed, although a contract was signed only a few years ago in Winnipeg, where Winnipeg Jets thought they had their star goaltender wrapped up for a 7-year term. Now he's 2 years into that 7-year term, and Connor Hellebuck is saying, you know what, I've had enough of Winnipeg. I want to go elsewhere. Where are you on that? The idea of trying to force your way out when you've put ink on a paper that said you were committed to this franchise?
I'm still torn. Part of me thinks players should do it because, again, as someone who was called up, sent down, traded, like teams are going to do it to you on any whim. So players should have that ability too. But at the same time, there should be this idea that guys have no move clauses in their contracts and yet are going to demand a trade to the exact team they want. That is something I think in the next CBA should be rectified in some fashion. Maybe if you demand a trade and you have a no trade clause, it gets removed, especially when you go public with it, because now I understand the idea is by going public, it puts more pressure on the organization, but it also limits them because now every other team knows there's pressure on them. So they're not going to get the return they want. So I'm of the belief that if a player has a right, they should try to make sure they use that right. But at the same time, the team has the right to hold on to that player. Nothing says they have to trade him. He can be as upset as he wants, but if he wants to get paid, he has to still show up to work. Like, that's what it seems like Steve Yzerman is doing with Dylan Larkin. Like, well, yeah, you've done that, but you have to earn your money. So you have to show up and follow the stipulations that are in the contract. So I understand why Hellebuck might want to do it and why he went about it the way he did. But at the same time, I think Cheveldayoff probably has the hardest job in hockey when it comes to management. And he has every right to hold on to him as long as he wants until the right deal comes up.
So let me throw this at the both of you. In Larkin's case, a 10-team no-trade list kicks in 2 years. For Hellebuck, it's 1 year. If you, this is my thought, if you're going to violate your own no-trade clause, why can't that list kick in immediately? So instead of 3 teams, you've got 10, and at least it gives the team that's now forced to trade you some sort of room to negotiate.
Well, my guess is he did it because he wants as much power as he can. Once that 10 team kicks in, then he loses a bit of power. Then there's less teams that he can say no to. So by doing it a year early, it keeps more power in his side. Whether that was the right play or not, I don't know. Time will tell. But that's what it seems like to me is do this choice, make this choice right now while you still have all the power.
Hey, Cameron, what's your level of concern for a franchise like the Jets, obviously, because we've all noted the sort of exodus of star players on Canadian franchises going south, from Brady Tkachuk to Matthew Tkachuk to Mitch Marner to Quinn Hughes, and that's a concern. But Hellebuck, if he's being sincere in his reasons for wanting to leave, he pretty much laid out his reasons in his end-of-season press conference, where he really questioned whether the Jets can win. Can they get players to come to Winnipeg, Manitoba, given the limitations of Winnipeg, Manitoba? As much as I love it, and it's OverDrive's second home, as Connor Hellebuck said, not everybody in the NHL feels the same way. He's tried to express his affection for the place, but he's essentially saying, we can't build a Stanley Cup winner here. I'm 33 years old, and I need to go somewhere where they can. Where does that put the Jets?
It puts the Jets in a very tough spot. Like Kevin Cheveldayoff, as I've said, he's got one of the hardest jobs, but he's done an excellent job with what he has to work with. They have to draft and develop better than any organization because, yeah, as you said, they have a tough time getting free agents. That's not a secret. A lot of players will have them on their no-trade clause. That's nothing that Cheveldayoff can change. So he has to do everything he can. The thing about all these players leaving is none of these players are really leaving great situations. Like, I don't see anyone in Montreal right now claiming they want out. Or like, no one. Cole Caulfield talks about how he gets chills still playing the Bell Center. Lane Hudson just signed a huge contract in Montreal. None of this is happening with franchises that are running smoothly. This is the first one in Hellebuck where I think it's an organization that's typically run very well. They had a down year, and he wants out. Unfortunately, that's how it works. Winnipeg doesn't have the same grace period and the same runway that other organizations have, where if you have a bad season, it's fine. Florida had a bad year last year. It's okay. There's reasons for it. Like, there was injuries, but they're going to get back to it. They have that grace period because now players view the NHL differently. They care about things like the no tax. They care way more now about weather, even though weather's always been an issue. They seem to care about it way more now than they have in the past. So all these things mean Winnipeg has to draft and develop better. And unfortunately, their last couple of drafts haven't brought much to fruition. You look at some of the first round picks over the last couple of years, they haven't been really bursting down the door of their lineup. So if they're not doing that, it's going to be a lot harder. They need those players coming through. Cheveldaev's done a good job trading some players. You look at the Dubois trade. That's turned out unbelievably for them. With Velarde coming in, doing a great job. Kupari was there for a little bit. And Iafallo, he's been a Swiss Army knife up and down that lineup. But that's the type of stuff they have to do. They have to bring in players through trades, or they have to bring in players through the draft. And it's a tough spot. It can be done, but it's a lot harder than in some of the organizations.
Cameron, our viewers want to know the picture over your left shoulder. Is that a Red Wing or a Montreal, a Canadiens picture? What is that? What's that team?
Those are two-team Canada, which is an automatic identifier. I'm not in it because there's no way someone who pivots like I can makes a Team Canada. Those are my brothers, too. That's the Hlinka Gretzky that he was in. I actually think it was still a Hlinka tournament when they won gold. And that's the U18s at the end of the year. I think they won bronze there. But that is not me.
Are you excited about Leaf possibilities this season?
I'm excited from an analyst perspective that things are going to go better because last year, a lot of the conversation, especially on Yes Guy, No Guy, when we were doing that, there was a lot of doldrums, a lot of days where it was tough to talk about. And I'm still at a point in my career where I'm not as confident as possible poo-pooing players. I'd rather talk about how good things are and how great guys are doing. So I'm excited that they look like they've got a better outlook on the season. I like how their back end's looking a bit more. Bobrovsky, I'm not someone who's scared about next season with him, being around him like I was for a bit. McKenna should do great things, and I'm excited about what Hiller will be able to put in. So I think things should be in a better standpoint, but I was saying that last year too. I thought they could sneak into the playoffs at the start of last season. I was wrong. So right now I'm cautiously optimistic that I can talk about more positives when I'm doing Leaf Talk.
Yes Guy, No Guy.
You opened the door. I mean, JP was all over that. Yes Guy, No Guy. The Leafs make the playoffs.
Yes Guy.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Positive yes guy, no guy.
And what do you think will be the Cameron when you think about that? I mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I don't see why they're doing what they're doing unless they believe they can, and I think they will. But if for you, what do you think will be if there's a headline about why they make the playoffs? What do you think it'll be?
I think more consistent defensive zone play. Like, yes, they're going to get some more offensive opportunities for Matthews with McKenna there. I think Radish will really help the power play. I think slotting other defensemen on that team in better positions will help them, whether it's Radish, whether it's OEL. OEL had a good year last year, but if you give him a more consistent partner, I think that'll help him that much more. But I just think with Jim Hiller coming in with that revamped bottom six, that should give them a more stout defensive system. Not only in their own zone, but also against the rush. Last year, they were very bad against the rush. Their defensive gap was just too big leaving the offensive zone, and their forwards weren't backtracking as much as they probably could have based upon how deep they're getting the offensive zone trying to create offense. So with a more compact group, with a better goaltender, we'll hope for better goaltending with Sergei Bobrovsky. I think there should be a bit tougher and a bit more stingy defensively. So that should be what their calling card is going to be with Matthews, Nylander, McKenna, that type of thing mixed in. I don't think it's going to be a run and gun team, but I do think that stinginess is what's going to be their calling card this year.
I like that stout defense. I don't think anybody's ever described the Leafs that way.
Not recently.
Yet.
Stout.
Again, more stout. More stout from something that was last year is not that hard of a bar.
Not very stout.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
I think it was actually stoutless last year. Cameron, thanks very much. Enjoy the weekend.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, Cameron Gauntz, PSN Hockey Insider, or analyst, I guess is the better way to describe that. Milton Fridays brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. Enjoy $15 lunch at BP when you get an entree, a side, and a drink, and you'll get it all in 20 minutes or less. A fast lunch doesn't have to be fast food. See you for a $15 fast lunch at your local Boston Pizza. We wrap it up next as OverDrive grinds on TSN 4 and 5, TSN 1050, the iHeartRadio app, and live on YouTube. Oh, Guy, final segment. Mail it in Friday. Jim Taddy, Dave Feschuk with you for mere minutes. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And I'm told that Jays and Dodgers is the play. The money line plus 171. So $10 will bring you 17. Not big return. Game on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play reasonably, responsibly, and reasonably well. Responsibly. 19 plus and physically located in Ontario. So speaking of big money, Cal McCarr, 20.4. Was it 163.2 over 8 years?
Which is the highest percentage. 17.5, I believe, of the cap. So that's Leo Carlson was like 17.3, just as an example. Celebrini, when he signed his deal, which will pay him 18.8, that was like 16.5% of the cap. So, yeah, it's like almost 18% for Cale Makar, which is the biggest chunk of the cap that we've seen a player take in recent memory.
And he's settling for, well, he's on the final year of a $9 million deal. And Celebrini was quoted as saying he left money on the table, and I think he did. Now, we were talking about who might be disgruntled. I don't know if he's disgruntled, but clearly Connor McDavid should be the mayor of Edmonton. I mean, he left a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, Connor McDavid wants the Edmonton Oilers to set up a little aspiration operation to cut him in on a little extra income, because he's a saint for taking that $12.5 million this year.
Ooh, and so you could say that Austin Matthews is actually underpaid.
Well, look, Matthews is in the second last year of a deal, and he's going to have the opportunity to extend if he feels like he wants to come July 1st. And look, as you pointed out earlier in the show, like, the economy has changed here.
Oh, it has.
And so what was a good deal a couple of years ago is no longer a good deal. And we're seeing it every time a deal is struck. The numbers are making us go, and that's a different kind of number.
Well, and, a franchise evaluation is through the roof. That's why you have all these private or these equity firms buying in, and with bigger stakes now. They used to be minority, but now they're in a little more, I think. But having said that, the NHL will announce a new franchise sometime in the next 3 to 4 months worth $2 billion.
Yeah.
So that would, what was the last one? $600 million?
Seattle came in for $650. So it's gone 3x plus since Seattle came in only 5 years ago, right? And 4x from when Vegas came in 10 years ago. So, the economics of pro sports are crazy right now. We're seeing the franchise values in every sport because, I think Jim, the thesis of the investment firm that is headed by the U.S. president's son-in-law's brother is that sports is a grade A investment because it can't be replicated by AI. Right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And as we're looking toward the future, I think a lot of businesses are very worried that they're going to be disrupted by AI. You can't disrupt live sports with AI. And that's why I think these franchises are one of the reasons why these franchises are going to be more and more valuable, and thus the economics of the sport are going to trickle down to the players getting more and more money.
And of the big four, professional sports, team sports, the NHL was on a lower tier. So I got to believe at some point, whether it's Gary Bettman or whoever the next chief is, or next
Gary Bettman's never going to die.
Next commissioner.
There'll never be another commissioner.
But the goal is to get the TV money where the other leagues are. And that can only happen south of the border.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, but they're going to try. Still, they're not starving. If you got, hey man, how long ago was it? It's been within the last handful of years, Jim, where we talked about how a team hadn't been able to win a Stanley Cup with a $10 million player, and now we got a $20 million player.
Yeah, what if they win the cup?
Well, they've won one, but he wasn't even making 10. Now he's making 20.
One of my favorites is the death of a narrative, so I would hope that could happen.
Well, you'd hope, but it'll be tougher, right? Anytime you got a guy making that kind of money, it's a huge chunk of the cap, and there's only so much to go around, and there's no exceptions.
So I'm a big what happens next fallout type guy. So if you've got somebody signing for 20.4, I got to believe there's a handful of guys that will either match that over the next 12 months or take it to the ultimate step, the next step, the full 20%. But then there's a bunch of other guys that probably can't get there. And I think what we may see is a bunch of shorter-term contracts.
Well, potentially. You can definitely make that case. That's certainly been a strategy that agents have used to for a moment to get to a moment like this, where in the flat cap era, the idea that, hey, let's sign shorter deals so we can get to another free agency when the cap is ballooning. Guess what? That's the moment right now. The cap is going up in ways it hadn't for many, many years. And so, yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be really interesting to see. McDavid's, just like Matthews, is in the second last year of his deal. The conversation around will he extend in Edmonton will begin shortly if it hasn't already begun. And so his little old $12.5 million salary looks awfully modest in an era where we suddenly have a $20 million player.
Quick thought here. So if it's Houston or Austin, it'll be somebody in Texas who gets that franchise. And with all due respect to Quebec City, I think our hearts are with that city to get a franchise. But I see Atlanta next.
Feels like it. They just approved the next step in the development north of the city. Apparently, it's going to be more of a northern suburban rink that they're proposing to build in Atlanta. Phoenix is not dead yet, Jim. You do hear the NHL loves to play off one city against another. They're playing off Austin against Houston right now. They want another option there in case the people in Atlanta don't give them what they want.
Well, Jays against Seattle tonight. We'll see what happens there. I want to thank everybody for stopping by, those watching and listening. And a reminder, I'll be back Monday with Keegan Matheson as we talk baseball. In the meantime, thanks for allowing us into your homes, and have a safe and happy weekend.
This is amazing. What a dream this has been.
The Emmys, live Monday, September 14th on CTV and Crave.